Hey, yo, call me an alarm I'm about to put the cock in the clock. Hey, everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the Game Skates. Today, and only today, that's right, we are here to have a nice, extensive conversation about Shadow's Doom powers, because we've had some good amount of time with the game. I've had a good amount of time to replay the levels, replay even the game, and I just wanted to talk about all the Doom powers, how they sort of add to the game, their best uses in levels and everything. And instead of just like ranking them like I usually do, I just kind of want to talk about each and every one of them, their pros and cons, and lock in. And of course, if you'd like to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to your boy and support the content. Let me know what else you'd like to see on the channel. So let's begin this. So Shadow's Doom powers, right? One of the early marketing beats of the game. In fact, something that wasn't even shown until the second trailer, which I love when games do that, right? Where like the first trailer is sort of like, all right, here's the thing. And then the second trailer is like, oh, fuck, here's the gimmick, right? I love when they do that because it's sort of like something crazy to hype over. And I remember how insane the internet went when we first saw the Doom wings, right? Just seeing that for the first time, seeing the Doom powers in use was crazy. Obviously, it created a new wave of fan art, and it just felt like something that was so unique to Shadow, right? And something that only Shadow could really have and own, and they did an incredibly good job with. In fact, Izuka has said on record that, you know, the Doom wings were the first thing they made because they really wanted something that could stand out and was something just cool, right? And so to have that and the other Doom powers we're going to get into, it's just, I'm so happy these exist. And we know that these were sort of, now correct me if I'm wrong, from what I understand, these are something that Shadow's always had, but because Black Doom came back and is messing with him, he's sort of like unlocking these abilities for him, or like unleashing abilities that are in him. And it's interesting to see in the story how Shadow, when he gets these Doom powers, is in pain, right? Like I think especially of the Doom Morph, right, where like it just sucks him into the ground and he just looks in pain. Or even when he's getting the Doom Blast, I feel like he doesn't enjoy getting the Doom powers. It's very much Black Doom messing with him and unlocking an ability of his own and applying it to Shadow, which I think is a really cool concept. And in fact, you know, that goes all the way to the end of the game where Shadow embraces the abilities, uses them one more time on Black Doom, and then decides, hey, I guess he's turning them off. I wonder what's the case with that. Is it a thing of he has them still, and he doesn't want to activate them, or that they're sealed forever? I like to think that there's like a small part of him that can still access it, but he doesn't want to, right? And I think that's what they're going with. But enough about that. We are going to go in the order that you unlock them. And the first one you get through the game is Doom Spear. First of all, love the opening animation for Doom Spears, where, you know, Shadow's kind of tweaking out and then you just see him like shoot out a bunch of them. Really cool raw shot. But I gotta say, Doom Spear is an interesting ability because it has created one of the best techs in the game. But in terms of bar-to-bar use, not really the most useful ability. So the idea of Doom Spear is, you know, you can shoot at enemies, and what you can do is you can stun them, right? Or you can just, you know, straight up attack an enemy. But when you unlock Doom Spear, you can multi-target. So you can multi-target enemies to stun multiples of them. Now, I believe when you stun enemies, the benefit is that you homing attack them a little bit faster, and you get actually a more chaos control meter for doing so. Now, I gotta say, while this is cool in concept, I feel like this is something that wasn't really utilized throughout the game, right? I feel like they make you use chaos spears, like the multi-target, twice in the open zone when you have to hold it down to open a gate or two, right? And then in levels, you really only end up using it to stun an enemy or two in like Rail Canyon. And actually, it gets a lot of uses in the bosses, I noticed, right? Like, for example, you're doing the Metal Overlord fight, and then there's the moment where you have to multi-target the giant ship. There's the Bio Lizard fight in the beginning where you're just kind of spamming chaos spear when he's shooting blasts at you for you to use it. And you do kind of use it against Mephiles. You actually can optionally use it against Mephiles, where when you're beating him down, if you press Chaos Spear, you can hit him in the face and then get that crazy Doom Blast on him. But of course, by far, Chaos Spear's best usage comes from the, what would you call it, like the spear jump tech. So this is an ability that sort of a lot of the fans have coined. It's sort of the new version of the homing dash from Sonic Frontiers. So basically the way this works is is if you boost in the air and spam triangle or whatever button it is for you to shoot chaos spears, Shadow will carry his momentum with that. So for example, if you jump, boost, and then spam triangle, you'll end up seeing yourself going way farther in the air, and then you can even jump again, spam it again to go even farther. So this is by far the best use of it, and has created some of the most fun speedrun techs just in the entire game. There are crazy skips you could do in Kingdom Valley and Sunset Heights and a bunch of levels, and it has been the move that has carried a lot of speedruns because it's sort of the easiest one to do, much like the homing, you know, dash was in Sonic Frontiers. This is sort of this game's equivalent of that, because it really doesn't take skill beyond like boost and tap triangle. You can obviously, you know, go way farther depending on how well you use it, but that's sort of the main use of it, and I found that alone carried the ability. But in terms of like the game itself, like I said, it doesn't really offer you many times where you feel the need to use it, except I would say in some of the sub challenges. There's a sub challenge where in Rail Canyon you have to just use them to pop these balloons, and I find those challenges are really cool. They even use them in the open zone, so there's some cool uses of it. But again, it becomes the sort of ability that's the most passive, but it's also an ability that's available to you throughout the entire game. So I think in some ways it's a really good power. And while you don't explicitly use it for the final boss, it is kind of poetic that during the final fight with Neo, Black Doom, Shadow, you know, summons 5 giant chaos spears and tosses them at Black Doom. I really like that. But like I said, beyond that, it's an ability that I felt like was underutilized throughout the game, right? And I would have liked to see more, but it's carried by the ability of, you know, the chaos spear toss that people are using and that I use a lot for speed runs. But with chaos spear, I mean, that's a move that Shadow's always had. It's just that now, you know, they're more, I guess you could shoot a lot more of them. But yeah, chaos spear inherently is not a crazy ability, which makes sense why it was the starting one. It also does have some use in Radical Highway, where there's some enemies that are shocking around them, kind of like in Sonic Adventure 2. But if you toss the chaos spear at them, it'll stun them so that that shock goes away, and again, it unlocks different paths. So honestly, the more I think about it, the more I really think like it is a fun ability. It's got some good uses, even though it's not the most like Devil Doom ability style, or really feels like a Doom power. It just feels kind of like a cool ability. Now let's talk about one of my favorite abilities, the second one you unlock in the game, and that is Doom Blast. Now I gotta say, first of all, Doom Blast animation when you get it is probably my favorite one out of every single one of them. So with Doom Blast, the way it works, like when you get that ability is cool, is it acts as if you are in first person view, where you are the enemy that Shadow's just kicking down and beating down a bunch, which I find is fucking awesome, right? It's like a first person POV where you're getting your ass beat by Shadow, which I think is super cool. So that alone gives it points. But Doom Blast is probably one of the most creative abilities in the game. So it only works on the Black Arms enemies in the game, because I think if Sonic Team had chosen to just be able to use on any enemy, every level would sort of become like mash on an enemy and see how far you can go, whereas making it specifically used for Black Arms enemies in certain areas, I think limits it in a smart way where you can sort of pick a path at some point. So the idea of the ability is that you hold the attack button and it'll launch an enemy in the air, and then you have a path to choose. So you can either shoot it straight up in the location it wants you to, or you can get creative sometimes and choose a direction. One of my favorite uses of, you know, mixing it up that people I think should try is in Kingdom Valley Act 1, right? So there's an area in Kingdom Valley Act 1 where you're supposed to use the Doom kick to get inside a building. You're supposed to use the enemy, kick him in the building, and that way you'll go fight a bunch of enemies. But if you just aim that to the left or right, you can just sort of shoot your way there and then stand a bit on the building and just get to the bird to get to the next area. That is one of my favorite uses of it. But I also like that the game knows that, you know, you can look around and zoom up with it, and there's an area in Sunset Heights Act 1, I believe, or multiple. There's a whole cave area in Sunset Heights Act 1 where you have so many uses of it. So for example, there's one where you've used Chaos Control. He's just hidden, right? And then you could just use that enemy to go to a different path in the air. There's spots where like you can do it, and then there's a path you can break if you aim upwards or downwards. So I really find Doom Kick is just a satisfying ability, because one, you get to beat that enemy, that looks cool. You get to teleport somewhere. making you feel the distance. And I also just think it's a dope ability in the challenge levels, where there's some of the challenge levels where you have to like aim it and then shoot yourself at a bunch of enemies. I just think it's a really cool and satisfying power that I wish got actually a lot more use. There's also another hidden one in Chaos Island Act 1, where like if you use Chaos Control, he's just there, and again you can shoot yourself forward to, you know, skip a bunch of platforming, which if you combine skipping the platforming with boosting in the air and then using the Chaos Spear tech with Shadow, you are looking at some crazy techs that are super satisfying to do. In fact, one of the most satisfying uses I found for the ability was in Kingdom Valley Act 2. There are versions of the black arms there, and when you kick them, you can kick them onto those green poles right away to activate them. So instead of yourself homing attacking into those, you can just shoot the enemy onto them. So not only are you teleporting, the path is already open for you to go rail grind on it. And I thought that was super satisfying. That's the thing about the ability, is at the end of the day for me, Doom Blast is probably the most satisfying ability in the game. It's got some really good open zone uses to find some secrets, right? You can kick them to different paths. The one thing about the ability is you can only do it straight forward, right? Obviously you can look in any direction forward, but it's not like you can turn completely around. The direction you're facing is often the direction you're going to aim with, but that's not too bad. I understand why they limited the use of it, like I said, because this could have been an ability that broke the game entirely. So I think limiting it to the point of view that you shot enemies at, and limiting how far it even goes is really cool. In fact, one of the best uses of the ability is in Kingdom Valley Act 1. So in Kingdom Valley Act 1, at some point you're doom surfing and there's this enemy chasing you, and a lot of people don't know this, right? Again, any enemy that's a black arm, you can use this ability on. So what you can do here is you can actually Chaos Control, stop time, and then hold square onto that enemy, and then you have access to an entirely different path that's upward on 2 different areas of Kingdom Valley. You can do this in 2 different spots, and it is probably one of the most satisfying ways of using it. So I really felt, for me, bar for bar, like Doom Blast was the most satisfying and fun ability in the game. In fact, Doom Blast is also used to kick Mephiles' ass. That's right, like one of the main times you use it is when you're fighting Mephiles. You're mashing on him and then you hold it to kick him onto something. It is so cool. You do kind of get to use it against Black Doom. So in the Neo Devil Black Doom fight, there's actually a tech I recently learned thanks to Twitter, where if you dodge all his things and then you go for the attack on him and you hold, Shadow does like this whole crazy animation where he flies in front of him and does a kick to him. So I thought that move was really cool. But yeah, with the mix of open zone usage, in the level usage, different paths you could take with it, I really think Doom Blast is a standout ability, and I honestly would love if they found a way for Shadow to keep this for future games. Now let's talk about Doom Surf. Now this ability, I'm obviously about to talk about Doom Surf and Doom Morph. I feel like they could have combined these two pretty well, but Doom Surf is basically Shadow's usage of water. Now, do I think it's weird that this even exists? Because I feel like Shadow could run on water. I mean, we literally see it in the movie, and I'm pretty sure we've seen it before. I guess not really. Like in 06, he kind of uses an ability to hover over water, but I don't know. I feel like we could have gotten away with Shadow getting some upgraded gear to be able to run on water. I feel like Doom Surf is sort of like a lame explanation to that, but I digress. So the idea here is now you can go on water, and it has honestly the most use in the open zone, because the open zone has a lot of water areas. It has a lot of different water challenges for you to do in the open zone, like ring challenges, collecting. So they do a good job of making you use Doom Surf a decent amount, but of course its main level usage honestly doesn't feel that deep as well. So the main areas you're going to see Doom Surf use is going to be in Kingdom Valley Act 1, you're going to see it in Sunset Heights Act 2, weirdly enough, and the final boss. And that's really it for main level usage. You obviously have challenge levels where you're breaking boxes and stuff, but that's really it. Now with Doom Surf, right, let's talk about how it controls. It's not bad. So it's not like a 360 movement type beat where you're like going to be really able to shimmy around and turn backwards. You can do it, but it is pretty much when you're in the direction you're facing, you're locked in. Now I always have issue with water controls in games, like when you're hovering on shit, where turning is an issue. It almost reminds me of Mario Sunshine when you go on those little like gloop things and you can pick which one you use, and depending on which one you pick, Mario has a different speed or turning rate. And I think with the Doom Surf, you often just want to keep going straight when you have it. I feel like turning around with Doom Surf is often just a mistake, and it's never going to help you. But the main thing about Doom Surf is you can press L1 and R1 to sort of hit a bunch of boxes or things that are near you, which I thought was obviously, limited in when you can use it, but that was pretty cool in terms of the Metal Overlord fight, because yeah, the Metal Overlord fight is entirely Doom Surf focused, right? And I think it's the only Doom ability in the game, besides I guess Neo Black Doom at the end, to entirely use one of the gimmicks to the fight. And I thought, honestly, Metal Overlord's fight with it is probably one of the best fights in the game. And in fact, if you play the hard mode of the Neo or Metal Overlord fight, it's actually one of the most satisfying S ranks in the game, because you really have to surf properly and hit every box. You have to get every jump with the ramps up, and when you press X at the right time at the ramp, you do a flip. I feel like it is one of the most satisfying uses. What's cool about the Doom Surf as well is you could sort of jump and press R1 to do a spin in the air for extra movement. In fact, when you initially get Doom Surf, if you press R2 right when you're on the ground, you get a boost, which a lot of people don't do. So that's another satisfying movement you can do. You get through these blue rings in the levels that are really fun. Like I said, this ability stands out incredibly well in Kingdom Valley Act 1, where there's this sort of open area in it, right, where you can pick, left, middle, right, and it's all Doom Surf focus. And depending on which path you pick, you can entirely be in Doom Surf. You can, go to certain paths and then, homing spring to a different area, but it gets a lot of uses out of it. And in fact, I found its usage very fun in Sunset Heights Act 2. So in Sunset Heights Act 2, there's an area where you end up in the sewers and you end up being on Doom Surf. And also, again, there's alternate paths you could pick there. And it even goes to a dynamic 3D camera towards the end of it. So I do think, honestly, Doom Surf ends up being used a lot, right? Again, if you factor the open zone, if you factor like in-game challenges that they have with it, in fact, the levels they use with it, even the final boss has a Doom Surf section where you are hitting certain of Neo Black Doom's balls, to hit him a bunch. And so I thought, while again Doom Surf isn't necessarily the most satisfying in terms to control fully, I still think it's an ability that was pretty fun and honestly used throughout the game. But I do think, like I said, I would like in the future for us to just get upgraded shoes so we can run on water, because I do think running on water is pretty raw. Oh man, and now we've got to talk about the most controversial ability in the game, and I didn't think this is gonna happen. Doom Morph. So this is your Splatoon Inkling form, your Spider-Man or Venom form, however you want to call it. One, I gotta say, when Shadow is getting this ability, he looks like he's dying, right? Like his eyes literally leave his soul. He's getting sucked into the ground, like he is losing himself when he gets this ability. I would honestly love a bit more like lore and understanding of how Doom Morph works. But yeah, so Doom Morph ended up being the most controversial because the game, I don't think, does a really good job of explaining how it works. And honestly, to this day, even though I kind of understand it, I still struggle with it sometimes. So the idea with Doom Morph is this, right? You obviously can only access it by going on like these muddy areas in the open zone, which I already thought was weird, right? Because I'm like, well, now we just have two abilities that are like water based, like where I can only travel on something because of that. So that's why I say that I feel like they could have combined Doom Surf and Morph into one like really cool ability. But I digress. I think Doom Morph overall, a weird power that's kind of satisfying when you learn. So the idea is like once there's these like purple spheres in the air, you can grapple onto them and become Doom Morph Sonic. It's not just something you have to get, right? It's something you have to like homing attack into and turn into. So the idea is you can either hold square fully, right, all the way to do just, you launch yourself a little bit, or, right, depending on the angle you're facing, when you let go, that's the any angle, Shadow is going to go out, which if you really think about it, that's not that difficult to comprehend. It's really just those two things. So you can, like, for example, hold the Doom Morph to the middle on the bottom, and then he's going to shoot himself upwards, or you do the full swing for like a minimal swing, or again, depending on the direction you let go of, boom, you can shoot yourself forward. And so once you've learned those abilities, it's not that bad. In fact, one of the most satisfying usage, I think, is for Doom Morph is chaining. So what you can do is when you're in the Doom Morph glub or gloop or whatever, you can press R2 and he does like a little boost in it, and that boost can fling you super far, right? And obviously the massive use of this ability is in Chaos Island. In fact, Chaos Island Act 1 and Act 2 both use this ability, and I feel like it's one of the better uses of them. So in Chaos Island, one of my things about it is you can boost off the first ramp to right away jump to the second ramp. You can even, there's another area with a bunch of goop where you can just hold R2 to jump over a bunch of platforms, and then you can start swinging and you can start chain swinging. There's platforms that are upside down that you can go on with the Doom Morph. I think when you really get into that flow state with the ability, it's actually really fun. In fact, I actually would have liked if there was a level that was like, or a challenge level even, which there are kind of, where it's all that ability that you're in, where you can't, you know, like fall out of it or anything. I feel like that would have been a really cool use. Now it's funny because the controls of it are pretty solid. When you're like in the goop, you can pretty much move better than you can in Doom Surf actually. So I think movement wise it's pretty good, and obviously the swinging is the thing that takes a lot of people in or out of the ability. And of course, let me know in the comment section how you ended up feeling about that power, and of course the other powers, but because that was the most controversial one. Now I will say, right, it doesn't end up having too much use in any other level, right? The only time you see it besides Chaos Island is that you don't even see it in Radical Highway. You see it in the final boss fight where there's a section where like you know you have to platform with the Doom ability. And well, I thought that was fun. I think the game makes you do it 3 times, which is weird, but I do like that with Doom Morph in that fight. If you really, again, look at this footage here, if you mess with it, you can literally launch yourself past so many of the platforms. That's how broken the boost jump out of it is you can just do so many platform skips, and I think it's really satisfying. You can even jump from wall to wall. There's these 2D sections where like you can sort of go in like a Mario pipe, I guess, but that's specifically made for it. You can cling on to ceilings with it. I don't know, like I struggle with this ability because in some ways I'm like, damn, this ability is really cool, but I do think there's that clunky feeling a bit where like if you even for a second get out of the goop, you're back to normal Shadow, and then you have to go back to the spot where there's a purple thing to reactivate it. I would have honestly liked if when you got the ability, as soon as you're in the purple goop, you just turn to that power. I think to me that would have been a bit better. Maybe it wouldn't work as well just because of something I'm not thinking about, but that's really the use of that. And of course the open zone has a lot of areas. In fact, the most notable area for you to use it is to access the Mephiles boss fight, right, where Mephiles is secluded in this underground area, and I think that's the best use of it because you're sort of trying to find where Mephiles is underground, that it's creepy, and it's really, the tone is super well done there. But I will say the Mephiles boss fight is a really good use because I was worried that the Mephiles fight was gonna rely on that gimmick in like a very bad way. It could have been that you were doing a long platforming segment with it and it overstayed its welcome. But I will say using that ability on the Mephiles fight was really cool. So sometimes what will happen is Mephiles will go in the ground, you'll use the Doom Surf just to knock into him, and then you beat the shit out of him, which is really cool. Or there's a moment where these pillars fall and then you Doom Morph all the way up, and then you swing to him and then you can hit him. So thought uses like that were pretty cool. Again, I've seen a lot of people struggle with it, and I don't blame people. I know some guys like to say it's a skill issue, but I don't think it's a skill issue. I think the game does a poor job of really explaining it well. And again, I've had moments where even as someone who gets the ability has had moments where I'm like, oh god, I didn't go as far as I thought I was going to. I didn't angle it correctly. Like it's a weird power that I think they could have probably just done a better job with overall, even if it is fun once you learn it. And like I said, there's some cool challenge levels that you can do with it where you're entirely in that mode and you're just, you know, you can speed pass through enemies with it. Like I said, you can jump from wall to wall. There's some cool uses with Doom more, but it's definitely like my least favorite ability probably in the game. But that's not saying that much of a bad thing because I still really like it, and when I get to that flow state with it, I enjoy. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I would have loved if earlier levels in the game suddenly had some areas that were Doom Morph accessible, and it would have been really cool. Like imagine an area in Space Colony Arc that activated once you got it, where there's like Doom Morph platforms where you would have skipped stuff. I understand why some areas didn't end up having different Doom ability stuff added to them right away, because I guess people didn't want to feel like when they got to those areas they were stuck or couldn't do something. But it would have been nice if, like, okay, now that you have this Doom power, this level now has this platform, this extra thing, and it would have been cool to see them, you know, expand the levels in that sense. And last but certainly not least, the final ability you get in the game, that is the Doom Wings, arguably the rawest ability, the supersonic or super shadow equivalent of the game, and man, are Doom Wings super cool. So the gimmick of the Doom Wings, besides being raw as hell, is basically it works as the supersonic of the game, where you need 50 rings to activate it, but once you do, you just basically can fly through anything as long as you have a boost. So it uses your boost meter to let you hover over things for a certain amount of time, and obviously, you know, it's taking down your rings as you're using it. Now, this ability I think is awesome. Now, the point of it is you don't have free flight with it, right? It is that you are going straight specifically, and you keep going straight. Now, obviously, you can let go and then press R2 again, let go and press R2 again to keep moving with it. But yeah, that is the main thing. And you're also invincible. So basically, when you are in the flying mode, you can just bump into enemies and they will, you know, get murked. And man, I gotta say, dude, this move is ultimately satisfying. You know what's cool about this thing is you can use it in every level, because that's right, every level has a version that's playable with or without the Doom Wings, and each level has its own S rank that you can get with the Doom Wings. And I found this was so incredibly satisfying, because while every level is very clearly not designed around it, like there aren't like rings in the air to indicate where you should go, it's still very cool to see how much of these levels you can skip once you have the enough rings to do the Doom Wings. I mean, you can do like crazy skips through half these levels, and I feel like that's one of the more underrated uses. And I think honestly probably my favorite super thing you can do in a Sonic game ever, because I often feel like when I get Supersonic unlocked at the end of Sonic games, I'm always like, all right, well, you can boost farther, I guess, and you're invincible, but that's really it, right? Whereas again, this fundamentally changes how you can go through the level. And I'm sure there's some cool skips you could do with Supersonic in some of the other games, but this feels a bit different, right? And I would like something like that with Supersonic in the next games, where like replaying the levels with Super gives me a different style of play, and it would be really cool to see, because I thought Doom Wings were dope. Now, Doom Wings' best usage is obviously in Radical Highway Act 1 and 2, where the levels are designed entirely around them. In fact, you can beat those levels with and without the Doom Wings, but it's very designed with the Doom Wings in mind, especially in Radical Highway, where there are complete different paths you can only take and access thanks to the wings. And one thing I found really satisfying to do with the wings is if you do that spear tech with it, you can, like, you know, shoot spears, press R2, boost with the wings, then boost yourself forward. Like, you can go really fast and far and away with the Doom Wings, and it's just one of the most satisfying things in the game. And I think it turns it almost into like a flying shooter type game, right? And you can even, I think, use your Doom spears while you're in it. So it's really satisfying, especially in Act 2, where like the entire act of Radical Highway Act 2 is a skill check. But again, it rewards you for like looking left and right, because, you know, there might be a ring path you can find there. There might be enemies you can fight to the left. There's like a whole other side you can get to, right, where you boost to it, and you can only do that with the wings. And it's so satisfying how cool the wings are, how dope they are. And I just loved going back to different levels with them. You can, like I said, do crazy skips on it. You can do crazy tricks on it. It is just so cool, so satisfying. I love the Doom Wings. But like I said, I would have liked if those levels that you go back to had different paths in the air for you to use with the Doom Wings, besides me like skipping a bunch of the level. But of course, your most hype use of the ability is going to be in the final boss fight with Neo Devil Doom, where you have full 360 control with the wings. You are just flying the whole time with them. You can move up, left, up, down, right, wherever wherever you want to go, fighting Devil Doom, and it looks raw as hell. And of course, one of the most satisfying final bosses in a Sonic game. Just and come on, man. The Doom Wings are carried by looking cool. And there's also some really cool challenges you can do in the open zone with them. In fact, I think of one of the hardest ones where when you're in, the Dark World version of it and you do the challenges, there's some time trial challenges you have to do where getting from one part to the level is so fucking difficult, but flying through it with the Doom Wings makes it a little bit easier, but it's still like a challenge, and I find it so fun. I think this is the best use of the super/gimmick in a Sonic game to this day. Overall, man, the Doom powers I really thought were one of the most satisfying parts of the game, and something I would love to see used in later Sonic games as well as Shadow games, because it's very rare. I don't know, when I was playing Frontiers, right, when you get to the cyberspace levels, you don't really have an ability you can use, right? It's like your main abilities of boost and run, and maybe you can use you can obviously use the homing attack or the homing dash when you unlock that in the DLC, but that's really it, right? I like the idea of having a gimmick and ability that you get throughout the game that makes different paths open up, and I hope they explore that more, because Shadow Gens had some of the most open paths in these levels in the game entirely, and so the idea of being able to access new areas, new things, thanks to different abilities is a dope one, and I love it so much. And while Shadow's Doom abilities are something I don't think are gonna come back, I would still love to know that there's somewhere within Shadow and that he'll unlock them at some point. But guys, let me know, of course, in the comment section below, what were your favorite usages of the Doom powers? Which one's your favorite? Do you want to see them come back? Do you like the idea of abilities like this? And of course, I love you. I will see you all next time. Peace out.